Hello, hello, Harry. How's it going today?
All right, Camilo, good to see you. Doing fantastic here at our offices at Logica,
Hey, listen,
Miami.
I'm actually drinking a tea, and I remember that we used to have an office in WeWork. Okay, in WeWork, and today we want to
Yes.
talk about different types of visas. We're gonna be talking with Harry, our CEO and attorney, immigration attorney Harry Tapias, about E-2 visas, about EB-5, and we're going to be answering some questions. But most importantly, I want to everyone to know, what is Logica, what it means Logica, what we do on a day-to-day basis. And Harry, you're the CEO of the company. Why don't you explain the people who are seeing this live now and the people who are actually going to watch this video, who's Logica and what do we do exactly?
Yeah, Camilo, we're both founders and co-shareholders of Logica, and that's why Camilo remembers us when we were in WeWork probably 7, 8 years ago. And so there's been a lot of growth, and thank you, Camilo, for all these years of hard work that we both put into it. So Logica is a law firm that specializes on immigration matters for people who are investing in the United States, people who are bringing talent. We also work with a lot of families, but I like to call it love, talent, and money. So everything that brings value into the United States, talent, money, love, that's what we do. And so Logica, what it does is that we want to let people know that we're not just a last name law firm. No, like we represent people who really want to be in this country through our brand. So we hope that we are conveying that. And today we're talking about investment.
Right, and just also we are close to 65 people working at the firm, three offices, two offices in Miami, one office outside Miami, and the idea is that we help immigrants, non-immigrants, to come to this amazing country to be able to invest, to be able to have different opportunities. And you mentioned the three magic words: love, talent, and money. And today we're going to
Yeah,
be talking about basically money. What is
money.
the investment, and we're going to be answering some questions. So I want the first question actually to be in the screen, so basically we can go over this question and have a discussion. So what is the main difference between the E-2 visa and the EB-5 visa in terms of immigration status? So let's put it like, what is the big difference, Harry?
Yeah, so they sound similar because they have an E and they have a number in them, but they're quite different. One visa, the E2, is a non-immigrant visa, and EB5 is a green card category. So what that means is that if you have a green card category visa, in a sense, you are going to live permanently in the United States. Whereas if you have an E2 and a non-immigrant visa, you're not going to be here permanently. The idea is that there's a short term in which you're going to be in the United States, typically 5 years, with the ability to extend, but you're never going to actually become an immigrant or a permanent resident. That's the main difference. So if you want to live here permanently and become a citizen after 5 years, choose EB-5. If you want to live here and just invest in the United States for at least 5 years and extend it every 5 years and maybe one day return to your country, you go with E2.
That's correct. And also, just to supplement the answer, there is a different criteria as well as to each one, completely different criteria, in which EB-5 has a specific amount of money, which is $800,000 or $1,050,000, while the E2, the criteria in terms of investment is substantial amount of money being invested or about to be invested in the US.
Right.
Huge difference. And it's important to note as well that lots of people, they're not interested in becoming a green card holder. So they're like, you know what, I don't want to opt for the EB-5. I actually am from Canada, let's say, for example, and I want to do the E-2 visa. There is a treaty between Canada and the US, so it's easier to go and get this visa, right, Harry?
Yeah, some may feel that way, and some other like richer countries may have the same feeling. But interestingly enough, recently I've encountered Canadians who are very interested in EB-5 as well as a alternative investment for them too. So, but I would say historically the E2 has been very popular for Canadians.
That's right. And now the last few words of the question in terms of immigration status, probably what we mean by that is that the EB-5, basically you go to get the green card, you can do an adjustment of status process. Maybe in the United States, you can do a consular processing outside the United States. And the E2 visa, the big difference in the petition itself is that the EB-2, you actually apply it overseas in order to go and get the visa. The EB-5, you have to, no matter what, you have to get it started through the I-526 in the US or through the I-526E in the US as well. So it's not that you can just apply for an EB-5 visa overseas. No, you have to go through a process with USCIS, while the E2, you can choose, right? You can get the visa overseas, or you can do an adjustment, like a change of status in the US as well.
Yeah, so because there's two departments that are handling these immigration matters. There's the Department of State, which essentially is the department that handles the consulates, right? And then there's an internal department called the USCIS, and you can file within the United States if you're here present. And with EB-5, you would file internally in a sense, and then the E-2, you have the option to file at the consulate or internally, and most people use the consulate.
Excellent. So now let's go into the second question. And this one is main difference between the E-2 visa and EB-5 in terms of investment requirements.
So you touched on it, and you use that term of substantial investment.
Right. We're gonna explain that because it needs to be very specific. So let's go into the E-2, which is probably the easiest one. And so what is the big difference? What is a substantial amount of money?
Right. Well, you a moment ago you talked about EB-5 and you mentioned $800,000 and $1,050,000, which to me sounds like a substantial amount of money. It sounds like a lot of money, right?
It is.
It is a lot of money, but that's not what the government means by substantial. So that substantial language is used only for E-2, and in E-2, it is a substantial investment. It is an investment that is sufficient to help run the business, and that it could give the business enough margin for the investor to have a normal lifestyle in the United States, in very simple terms. So you need to have also a sufficient investment, or substantial investment rather, so that the business can actually operate. And I'd like to give this example. Depending on what you're going to invest, you might invest in a car wash business, or you might invest in a car sales business. Substantial will be different. Substantial amounts are different for each one. For the car wash, maybe $200,000 is substantial. Whereas for the sales of a high-end vehicle company, you might need to be spending $1 million, right? So it's also relative. What else would you add there, Camilo?
Yeah, like I also will supplement by saying that the investment must be proportionate to the business, right? So basically, each business is different. If I want to open, let's say I want to open or like buy a restaurant, let's say in the Miami area or in Boston, New York, maybe 100 to 100K should be enough, right? If I want to invest in land development, probably I need like $500,000. If I want to buy a gas station, probably with 300, 350, that should be enough. So we need to look at the business itself and the deal that you're trying to close. And at the same time, the higher the amount, the less that I have to actually invest right away. Because one of the main requirements of the E-2 visa is in the process of investing or have invested money in the US. So let's say that the business as a whole, the business plan says that you need to, or the purchase agreement, like $500,000. Maybe with 200K, which is 40%, should be enough, right? But let's say that the restaurant is worth like 120. You don't want to go to let's say to Toronto with $40,000 invested, right? You want to go probably with 100% of the total amount of invested. So the higher the amount of value of the purchase that you're buying, the business that you're buying, then probably like the lowest that you can actually go and try to pay for.
Oh, right.
At the same time, each deal is different. So you need to talk to an immigration attorney, talk to your attorney, to your corporate attorney as well, to understand this main requirement, which is a big difference. Now, EB-5, completely different monster. Obviously, why? Right. Because it's obviously substantial. $800,000 is substantial. $1,050,000 is substantial. But a lot of people say, okay, but what is it? Is 600? Is 801? Is 2 million? Well, basically, it's $800,000 or $1,050,000. Especially when you talk about regional center projects, right, Harry? But at the same time, I ask you a question. What about if I want to go and invest in my own franchise and I want to create 10 jobs in an EB-5 and my investment is 2 million?
Right. So in that case, if you want to invest in your own project, you're the sole owner, sole investor. You can't employ 10 people for 2 years. you could go ahead and make the minimum, the required minimum, which is 1,050,000, and go ahead and do it yourself. But that brings a lot more risk inherently versus running versus passively investing in a project where there will be maybe 100 people investing or several more. So you have to kind of weigh the risks. You can say, well, I could put in the exception amount, which is $800,000, right? And invest with a big group of people where I'm ensuring that at least 10 people will get employed for 2 years, for my portion, and that means that everyone else will also get people employed for their portion as well. Or I can try to do it myself, on this one project, but you just have to be sure that you're going to be able to meet the requirement. Because if you're not able to show at the end of a 2-year process that you have employed 10 people for 2 years, you will lose that conditional requirement, which is you didn't meet that condition and your green card could get revoked.
That sounds right. Let's go now into the next question as well. And well, the next question: what specific requirements must the E2 visa applicants meet compared to those for the EB-5? So now let's go into a criteria.
Right.
Okay. So and let's have a brief conversation, Harry. So
Yeah.
the E2 visa, one of the main requirements is there must be a treaty country. I mean, between the two nations, right? A treaty of commerce and navigation, let's say between the U.S. and Canada, between the U.S. and Spain, between the U.S. and U.K., between the U.S. and Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, Paraguay, etc. So, but what about EB-5? If you compare, there is no treaty country between.
There's no treaty. There's no treaty country with EB-5. Essentially, it's the entire world. And of course, we may want to be cautious if it's maybe coming from countries that are known enemies of the states. That might be a different matter. But essentially, the rest of the world is open to investing in EB-5. Whereas with E2, you must make sure that your country is in that list of treaty countries.
Okay, that's excellent. The second one, let's go into source of funds and path of funds. Basically, the way how the funds originated, they were legal. They're legal from a legal source. But that happens in both cases. Probably in EB-5, we need to dig deeper, right? Like how the $800,000, how you actually got the $800,000 or the $1,050,000. While the E2 visa, I don't think we have to go 5 or 10 years to understand how we actually got the money. But at the same time, it's very important. It's a really important requirement. We need to be able to trace the money, how this money originated, and how this money got into the U.S. Let's go. You already explained about the substantial test in terms of E2. And now, I mean, we know the big difference as to EB-5, which is a higher amount. Yeah. Now, what about if we go into the EB-5, let's say in terms of ownership, right? Because in the E2, how can you explain? Because
that's a great point you're bringing up. With E2, you need to demonstrate that you have at least 50% ownership of the business shown by control of funds. And you want to be able to show that in your shares or in your membership interest in the business, you have at least 50% to qualify. If you have less than that, you will not qualify. Okay, so some people will come to us and say, hey, we have 3 E2 investors. We all have invested in this one business. And I'll ask, all right, so how are the shares divided? 33%. None of you are going to qualify. And then it happens.
One of the main requirements is control as well.
Control.
So, and I know that it may sound silly because I believe you can have control of a company with 20%, 25% if the documents basically state that. But USCIS and consuls, they want to see 50% ownership. But you can have control of a company with 25%. The issue is explaining that to the consul and to the immigration department as well, in case you have other business partners who are majority shareholders of the corporation or owners of the company, the LLC. So, all right. So we have treaty, we have legal source, we have control, right? Then we have, let's go into one of the main requirements of the E2 visa, which is that the investor must be able to come and direct the business.
Right.
He's applying for the E2 visa to direct the business. How will you compare this requirement with EB-5?
So with EB-5, you're not directing the business unless you want to make your own investment of 1,050,000, right? But if you're going to be a passive investor and being one of many investors, you're essentially delegating, directing the business to a third party who's promising you to employ those 10 people for 2 years. So what you are doing is that you're investing in a fund where you're going to have a very small rate of return, but your ultimate return is getting your green card for yourself and your spouse and your children under 21. So with E2, you're actually working the business. You're directing the business. You're making sure that you're signing the contracts. You're making sure that you're employing people. You are directing the business. With EB-5, in most cases, you are passively investing and waiting for your payback period, maybe at the end of 2 years or 4 years. Get your money back, little or no interest, but you got your green card. E2, you're working it, you're sweating, you're trying to not get a 1% interest rate. You're trying to earn 15-20% on your investment and hopefully make it worthwhile for you.
Right. Now here you're basically referring to the regional center investment,
Right.
in which the law actually allows, let's put it this way, like passive investment, passive like owners. Let's say if it's a partnership, probably the investors are going to be limited partners, and then there is a general partner who's basically managing the business. But once this business basically creates the jobs, which is one of the main differences that we're going to talk about it as well, and the development is completed, that's it. You get the green card, you meet the criteria, there was investment, everyone made money, you got your money back, you get the green card, and that's it. While the E2 visa, you know what, you have to continue with the business for the period of time that you have the visa, and that's a huge difference, right? Because it's not like, okay, I got the visa for 5 years and that's it, I'm done. No, you need to continue with the business. The EB-5, you complete the project in 3-4 years. That's it.
That's
You
it.
basically did everything that you needed to do. Now what you need to do is probably just wait. So now let's go into one of the main requirements for the EB-5 and big difference as well, which employment. So we know that for E2 visa, a lot of people ask you this question: how many employees do I need to have for the E2 visa? And what about EB-5? So you can actually explain to everyone.
Yeah, so with EB-5, there's a very specific requirement of 10 full-time employments. It could be also created by indirect employment, but it has to be the equivalent of 10 full-time employees over a 2-year period. Whereas with E2, the requirement is investment. Okay, and investments can be in people. It has to be irrevocable investment. So meaning that you put the money in, and the only way you're going to get it back is by working it or by making the investment work for itself. So you can invest in people to meet that criteria. Now, when you first invest in an EB-5, an E2 project, you likely don't have employees, maybe one, right? And at the end of 5 years, and you want to then extend the 5 more years, it is at least favorable to show that you have employees. But the law is not going to is not going to require you to have invested in people, whereas EB-5 is very specific. You have to have 10 people employed for 2 years. So that's something to consider. And investment in people in an E2 is actually very favorable because it is irrevocable investment. So you have to think about that, but it's not a requirement.
Now, like let's say that I want to invest in EB-5 through my whole project, my investment. So I need to create 10 jobs.
Right.
But those jobs need to be direct jobs, basically in W. If I invest through a regional center program,
right,
allows a pool of investors. This creation of jobs can be direct, indirect, and induced jobs as well. So that's a big difference, and that's why many people go and say, you know what, let's go through one of those big projects, and then probably it's going to be way easier for me to go and get the green card. Because imagine creating 10 jobs in your enterprise. Let's put it like 50K per job for 2 years. That's basically $1 million that you just have to pay in payroll. Plus the improvement. So that's a big difference. So let's go into the next question. And the next question basically states the following: what types of businesses or investments are most suitable for each type of visa, and why? Just a disclaimer, we are not financial advisors, and we're not advising that you need to go and invest in EB-5 in X, Y, and Z project. Okay, This is just like some clients that we have hundreds of clients that they have invested in different projects. So now let's go back into the question. What do you think about this, Harry?
Yeah. So at this point, you have to think about what does investment mean for E2 and what does investment mean for EB-5. So let's look at E2 first. What is most suitable for E2? Really, it's there's no specific answer for this. You have to make an irrevocable investment. Now, what I have found over time is that it is easier for investors in E2 to invest in companies that require materials or require physical things because it's easier to quantify the investment. So if you want to own a lumberyard, or if you want to own a restaurant, you're constantly investing in materials, foods, lumber, or whatever it is. So you're constantly investing, and it's very easy to quantify that amount. Whereas if you have an E2 business in some type of consulting business where all that you really need is just a computer and a desk, and then it becomes harder to show that you have a substantial investment. That's what's difficult about maybe the e-commerce world, that it's hard to show that investment unless you're actually buying products, right? So something to think about. E2 it's easier when you have like physical, tangible things that you're purchasing, and you can show substantial investment through that way. EB-5, investment there is quite different. You are passively investing in most cases to a third-party fund managed by a regional center that is going to ensure that 10 Americans get employed for that 2-year period. So that's how you have to kind of look at this. And you know that with EB-5, you have to at least meet the $800,000 amount. Whereas with E2, there is no minimum amount. It just has to be substantial, and you apply a proportionality test. You look at the business, you look at the requirements of the investments, and then you decide what's substantial. But we know from practice that even if it's a small business, a $30,000 investment is not going to be considered substantial, even though it's just a small business. You want to be at the 6-figure mark, $100,000 or more, and even today with rising inflation, $100,000 doesn't seem like that much. So the higher you go, the better.
That's right. Also, E2 visas, I would say, like any type of business itself will qualify if the requirements are there, especially the real and operating. There is an office, there is employees, there are invoices. The company is basically operating. Not passive investment, though. Not putting money into Amazon shares, into mutual funds, into buying house apartment. No, it has to be a real and operating. Well, EB-5, what I've seen projects that actually work is basically buildings and developments. Basically, like a developer wants to create X building and then basically raise funds to basically do it, and then they do an EB-5 offer. That's usually the way it works.
Yes, and that's that helps answer the question too, because most of the EB-5 projects are some type of real estate based project. Now there are other projects that are technology based, so you have to also assess your risk. And technology-based EB-5 offerings may have better returns than a real estate-based project, but you're also assessing your risk, and you cannot eliminate risks in either EB-5 or E2s because it's part of the law. You're investing at risk. Right now, EB-5, the industry has mitigated the risks substantially by focusing a lot in real estate, but something extraordinary can happen. A building goes up, an earthquake happens. Or the financial structure of the EB-5 wasn't done well, and things like this can happen. But so you need to go in and analyze your investment opportunities with a financial advisor. And I can share at least that the EB-5 industry has done a good job to try to mitigate that risk, so that investors can feel comfortable to invest in the United States.
That is correct. If any of you have any questions, please, you can actually put in the chat so we can actually answer it. And now we're going to our final question, which is, how long does it typically take to get this E2 visa or EB-5 green card? Let's put it this way, change of status and so on. Like it's a very complicated question because the times basically change, and since COVID, the pandemic, has been like kind of like hard to come like have like a specific time, especially for E2 visas. But what do you think so far, based on your experience here?
Well, Okay, so with E2, it can vary by the consulate that you're choosing from. So you can quickly make an investment, and in terms of the time that an attorney takes, it can take us a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, to gather all the evidence and prepare a proper E2 petition to present to the consulate. So you may want to factor in a few weeks or a couple of months for your attorney to work and for you to give him or her the investment information and meet all the criteria. Now, from that point on, once the case is ready to be filed, the attorney needs to schedule an interview for you at your nearest consulate. So if you're coming, say, from Germany or you're coming from Spain, it may be very easy to get an interview because there aren't long lines of wait there. So it could be a few days or a few weeks. Whereas if you're coming from the countries with higher demand, say from like Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, you may be waiting a few months, sometimes several months, 5 to 7 months. That shouldn't be the case all the time, but it has been happening. So what we do is that we will, in a sense, shop for consulates that have lower waiting times, and we will ask the consulate if they will be willing to take a person from a different country into their office in order to get them a faster interview for the E2. That's us trying to do our best for our clients, right? So it can be several months before you get the E2, but that's relatively fast nonetheless. If you look at EB-5, it may take maybe 2 years or so before you get a green card.
Probably
Right?
more with the time now, unless it's an exemplar approval. But yeah, but it's the green card as well, right?
No,
I
but
mean, I tell people, hey, you don't get a green card in 4 months, 6 months. What? I mean, it's impossible. Before I've seen like exemplar approved projects, yes. But nowadays, listen, I also want to make sure that my money is invested in the right project. I don't want to just go into any crazy project that is promising 90 days and then what about my money afterwards? So,
right.
Harry, we have to go, but thank you a lot. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
This is great information as to E2s, EB-5s, and we're going to continue doing this live so actually people know, hey, what are the main requirements of the E2 visa? What are the main requirements of the EB-5? Do I qualify for E2, for EB-5? Just to finish the live, any advice that you have for potential immigrants, non-immigrants, before they actually hire an attorney, before they actually decide to come into the US, what would you recommend them?
Yeah, I think for those looking in between E2 and EB-5, what you want to be able to look at is what goal do I want to accomplish over the next few years? And if you have family, how do I want my children to live over the next few years? So if you have a family, a young family, and you want those children to have a green card, consider EB-5. It's a lot of money, but the investment is worth it, and you get money back. If you see yourself as having just enough money to make a good investment in the United States, and you want to just improve your margins and have a better return than your home country, consider E2 as well. And with your attorneys, you want to make sure that you're working with a team of people who have years of experience, and we're happy to share that at Logica. We have approximately 12 years of experience and a really big team. We're close about 70 employees, I think 65 at this point, with a mix of attorneys and other legal professionals. And we're here to help people realize their dreams.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Camilo.